today we are going to be talking about the Belgian Grand Prix, at least the weekend of it. The results will still be here on the left hand side of the screen. No timings on it though, because there was no race. But this isn't a 5 talking points video or anything like that. This is just a little bit of a review of what happened over the course of the Belgian Grand Prix weekend. So going into the weekend, we kind of knew that the weather was going to be a little bit iffy. The forecast rain like every day from like Wednesday to Monday or something ridiculous like that. And alas, when the teams went into practice on Friday, it did indeed start raining, although not very much. It was mostly dry running on Friday, but Saturday is when the rain came, and for qualifying it was pretty much fully wet. But Q3 is when it really started to kick off. First of all, the weather was ridiculously bad. Multiple drivers went out on the track and they all said they think that it should be red flagged as the weather was too bad, visibility was poor, there was aquaplaning. Lando Norris went to start a lap, even he was complaining of aquaplaning and all that sort of stuff, and then at the top of Eau Rouge he crashed into the wall, sent him spinning around and out of qualifying, to the dismay of Sebastian Vettel, who had told Michael Masi himself, yes, red flag this please. Of course, that crash did mean that there was eventually a red flag, although there was a lot of people annoyed at that decision. Not the decision to red flag it after the crash, but the decision to not have red flagged it already. That the fact that a crash like that had to happen for there to be a red flag. That after the whole crash was cleaned up and the weather cleared up a little bit, Q3 carried on. And yeah, Max Verstappen got pole position, but the big shock of the day, of course, was George Russell, who qualified in P2. He just went out at the right time, on the right tyres, and nearly got pole position for it. And now we get to the big discussion, the race day. First of all, Formula 3 raced in the morning. It was obviously very, very wet, but it was not wet enough for them to not race. So the Formula 3 race went ahead as planned, and then the weather just continued to come. It just continued to rain and rain and rain and rain. You got the feeling pretty quickly that the start was going to be abandoned or it was going to be delayed, and pretty much straight away they confirmed that the race would be delayed by 10 minutes, and then another 5 minutes, and then another 5 minutes, and then another 10 minutes. You can kind of see where this is going, can't you? They realised too late that the weather was too bad to race. So finally, half an hour after the race was supposed to start, the safety car took the cars round and after one lap, brought them into the pits under red flag conditions. And at this point, total chaos ensued because after two formation laps behind the safety car, no one knew if the race had started or not, because there's 2 official timers that come with a Formula 1 race. That is the 2-hour timer in which the race must be completed, so the race itself must not last longer than 2 hours, excluding red flag periods. If a red flag occurs, the clock is stopped. However, that 2-hour period must be completed within a separate 3-hour period, and the race was supposed to start at 2 p.m. That means that the 3-hour clock should have started at 2 p.m. and lasted until 5 p.m, meaning that the race, which should last for 2 hours maximum, should be completed by 5 p.m. And at the point of the first red flag, no one knew if either clock had been started, because they'd done 2 formation laps, the second of which was technically the first race lap. So the race clock had started, however no one knew if the other clock had started, the 3-hour clock. It was then confirmed about an hour or so in, when I think it was Ron Meadows from Mercedes asked Michael Masi, has the clock started? And Michael Masi simply went, yes, it has. And what was even more confusing was the potential number of laps that the race was going to be, because initially everyone thought that it was just going to be 43 laps, as they'd done 1 extra formation lap, therefore a lap had been knocked off the counter. But then when McLaren asked how many laps were left, it occurred that there was, at that time, 39 laps left. The reason for that is that there was a message that was popping up at the top of the screen, which basically said that the start had been delayed, and every time that message popped up, it knocked a lap off the race. At this point, it felt like the FIA were just making rules up as they went along, and then when the clock reached an hour left, so 4 o'clock UK time, the FIA then stopped the clock through force majeure, which, if you don't know what force majeure is, that basically means that you are allowed to do something which normally you are not allowed to do because of exceptional circumstances, and this was definitely an exceptional circumstance. Normally the clock is not allowed to be stopped, but they stopped it because of the weather. Finally, after a 3-hour wait, around about 5 o'clock here in the UK, cars were taken out around the track again with a 1-hour timer to complete the race. However, there was not to be a race. The safety car took the cars around for 2 laps, and then it was red flagged, and about half an hour later the session was stopped completely and the race was over, which means that Max Verstappen got the race win, George Russell finished second and Lewis Hamilton finished third. Every driver who finished in the top 10 got half points, as 75% of the race wasn't completed, but the 2 minimum laps required for it to be a race were completed, therefore the points were awarded. Now, what do I feel like should have been done? Michael Massey and the FIA, they had to really think on their feet here, because this had never happened before. This situation had never happened before. This is the shortest race in Formula 1 history. It only lasted technically 2 laps. And although there was no actual racing involved, the fact that they did those 2 laps makes it count as a race. Personally, I think that they should have done more than just the 1 lap they did at the start of the race, or more than just the 2 formation laps. They should have gone round another couple of times. Therefore, they cover off any threat of potentially not completing the minimum amount required to do a race. So they could have done 3 laps or 4 laps right at the beginning when, let's be honest, the conditions were at their best, because they just got worse as the day went on. Therefore, they wouldn't have had to worry about the event technically not taking place. And they could have called it off way sooner, because they were just waiting for a gap in the weather where they could take the cars out again, because at that point the event had not taken place. There had only been 1 lap. So I think that they should have taken the cars out right at the beginning for maybe 4 or 5 laps. Yes, it wasn't very safe, I will admit that. I do not want them to risk anyone's safety, of course I don't. But it was more safe to do it then than it was to do it when they actually did it. And plus, the more time that they're out there, the more water gets shifted. Yes, the rain was still coming down, but if the cars keep going around, they shift the water away eventually. And even if they had not actually got racing, but the more laps behind the safety car that went on, the more, quote, safe it would have been to carry on going around the track behind the safety car. Yes, it still wouldn't have been probably safe, but it would have been more safe if they'd have done 5 or 6 laps. In terms of the awarding of points, it's a tricky one, because, you know, points aren't awarded, then it's a non-event. The event technically didn't happen. There would have technically been no Belgian Grand Prix. So I can see why that they maybe wanted to complete the minimum number of laps for the points to be awarded, for it to be an event, for it to be a race. Because just imagine if the points hadn't have been awarded. All of those efforts by the teams to get to Belgium, to do the practice sessions, do the qualifying sessions, would have all counted for nothing. Obviously, in hindsight, of course, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but they would have gone there for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So in a way, the points have been given for qualifying, because everyone finished where they qualified, apart from a couple like Nicholas Latifi and Charles Leclerc, and Carlos Sainz, who sneaked into the points due to grid penalties for Bottas and Norris. So in a way, I feel like, yeah, the giving out of points, I feel like needed to be done. Otherwise, there would have been no points in the entire weekend. However, some of the drivers think otherwise. Lewis Hamilton called the whole thing a farce and says that they only sent them out to get the minimum 2 laps, which Michael Massey fully denied, saying that he sent the cars out to get a feeler for the conditions, because, I mean, you don't know what it's going to be like unless you try it, do you? You don't know what the visibility is going to be like, what the track's going to be like, unless you take the cars out on the track and have a look. The medical car or the safety car are not enough really to gauge the conditions. They need the driver's input. They need a Formula 1 car out there being able to give the input that they need. Fernando Alonso said that they shouldn't have awarded points. Now, that was the first time I'd seen a driver say they shouldn't have awarded points, and I just thought, well, he's just a bit salty because he was classified 11th and didn't get any. But then the likes of Carlos Sainz, Sebastian Vettel, who finished in the top 10 and got given points, said that they felt very weird receiving points for a race that essentially didn't happen. Jos Capito, the CEO and team principal of Williams, said that a podium's a podium. You know, George Russell was happy with his podium as well. He celebrated it as if he'd got it legitimately in a race situation. But at the end of the day, they have every right to celebrate. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Should the race have started at all? Should the cars have been taken out at all? Should points have been awarded? All of that good stuff. Let me know what you think in the comments. I know that F1 are looking to change some of the rules to cover off this sort of thing happening again, or to change what happens. Let's just hope that we get a race at Zandvoort next week, eh? Let's hope that it actually happens. But if you enjoyed this video, guys, make sure to smash that like button down below. Subscribe if you like what you see and you want to see more. And if you don't want to miss a video, hit that little bell next to the subscribe button. You'll get a notification whenever I upload. But until next time, thanks so much for watching.